You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin.
I was exhausted when I finally walked through the door. My suitcase felt like it weighed 100 pounds, my neck was stiff from hours in the car, and all I wanted was a quiet moment. A hot shower. Maybe a drink. Instead, I found Emily sitting at the kitchen table with a man I didn't recognize. He was slouched back in one of my chairs, eating the breakfast I'd always made for myself. My eggs, my bacon, the toast just right. He wasn't just wearing my clothes, he was acting like he lived here. Like this was normal. I blinked, trying to process it. I wasn't even sure who to look at first. Emily, or the guy, who I now realized was Derek. I wasn't sure what pissed me off more, that this was happening in my house, or that they both looked so damn comfortable. "Morning," Emily said, like everything was fine, like I hadn't just walked in on a scene out of some bad movie. "Hi," I managed to croak, voice rough from the drive. I dropped my bag by the door, still trying to shake off the disbelief. Derek didn't even look up. He just shoved another bite into his mouth, chewing slowly, like we were all just having a casual morning chat. "You're back early," Emily said, cool and calm, like nothing had changed. "I've been meaning to talk to you." I swallowed, waiting for her to go on. But she didn't. Instead, she just looked at me, her eyes almost daring me to say something. "I'm listening," I said, my voice neutral. "There's a new domestic partnership," she said, as though that explained everything. "Between the three of us. Derek's here to stay. It's time you accepted it, Jordan." I froze. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. I nodded, masking the storm that was already building inside me. "Okay," I said, my voice steady, too steady. "I'll pack." She seemed satisfied with that, like it was all settled. But what they didn't know? The house, the cars, the luxury, none of it was really mine to give away. It was all corporate property, part of Beck Modular. I didn't need to accept anything. I just needed time. Time to make sure they understood the rules. It wasn't always like this. Back when I was still trying to build something real, before everything got tangled up in Emily's latest revolution, there was a time when I could at least pretend we were partners. The house behind us was just a house then. A place I'd sunk every dollar I had into, working late nights, weekends, building my business from scratch. Beck Modular Systems. A small startup I started with nothing but an idea and a shitty old workshop at the back of the house. The workshop itself was a disaster. Tools scattered everywhere, piles of parts that looked like they belonged to a junkyard rather than a high-tech drone startup. But it was my space, my escape, and I loved it. While Emily hosted yet another wellness party or curated the perfect Instagram feed for her followers, I stayed in the chaos. The smell of soldering iron and motor oil became my comfort, the hum of the machines a lullaby. I'd stay up for hours, running designs through simulations, building prototypes, fine-tuning everything. There were nights when I felt like I could see the whole thing unfolding in front of me. If only I could get the drone systems right. Climate monitoring drones. That's what Beck Modular was supposed to be. A sustainable solution to agriculture, something that could help farmers track weather patterns, optimize crop rotation, and all of it with reusable, modular hardware. It was a good idea, and for a while, I was the only one who believed in it. Emily, not so much. Midlife garage project. That's what she called it when I'd stay up late tinkering, ignoring whatever else was going on in the house. She'd roll her eyes when I'd talk about breakthroughs or supplier meetings. "That's nice, honey," she'd say. "But have you seen the new skincare line I'm reviewing?" She didn't get it. Didn't even try. But I didn't need her to. I was getting somewhere, even if no one saw it. My first break came from a university in the Midwest. Agriculture department needed a tech solution to monitor crop health and weather conditions. They liked the modular design of my drones. They liked that I wasn't trying to sell them a bunch of one-time use gadgets. They saw the value in sustainable tech, and they were willing to pay for it. That was when I knew I had something. The first contract was small, just a pilot project. But it was enough. Enough to keep me working in that hellhole of a workshop, turning it into something that would actually pay the bills. And it wasn't long before word started getting around. Contracts grew. Suppliers came knocking, asking how they could get involved. I set up an LLC, kept everything separate, my personal finances, the business assets, everything, because I knew from day one, the one thing you can't afford to mess up is the structure. Once I had that, everything else could fall into place. Emily stayed out of it. She was still too busy with her self-care, retreats, getting facials, and hosting events for her influencer friends. She didn't care that I was building something real, something that could change the way the world did business. She was more interested in her own expansion than in anything I was doing. I tried to tell her about it, tried to get her excited about where things were going, but her eyes glazed over, and her mind was already somewhere else. Her world was about image, about looking perfect on Instagram. It was exhausting. And the more I focused on Beck Modular, the more I realized she had no interest in being a part of it. I used to think maybe it was just a phase, that once I started making real money, things would change, that she'd take an interest in the work. But the more I pulled away into my projects, the further she seemed to drift into her own world. Every conversation we had about my work felt like an intrusion into her space, as though my dreams were an annoyance to her carefully curated life. She never asked how the contracts were going, never cared how the pilots performed. It didn't matter. She had her own agenda, and I had mine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all slipping out of my hands. She wasn't there for the late nights I spent building the company, the mistakes I made, the breakthroughs. She didn't see how hard it was, how much I sacrificed. She just saw the end result, the luxury, the cars, the house. And somewhere in her mind, I think she thought that all of it was mine to give away. And when I look back at all that time, all the hours spent away from her, away from everything, I can't help but wonder if she ever realized how much I'd built, how much I had to lose. The shift in Emily started slow, barely noticeable at first. At first, I thought it was just another phase. One of those things she'd get over once the latest self-care fad faded. But then it didn't. It kept building, until one day she walked through the door, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years, and everything changed. She was talking about a new group she'd joined. Some conscious evolution circles, led by a woman named Crystal Hayworth. Crystal was one of those lifestyle strategists, the kind who always seemed to have a new book out, a new hashtag, and a new way to tell people how to live their lives. She had that air about her, like she'd figured out some secret to the universe that no one else could access. And Emily? She was buying into it. Hard. At first, it sounded harmless enough. Some wellness group, probably full of overpriced workshops and vague affirmations. But then Emily came back from one of her sessions and started talking about limiting beliefs and energetic alignment. That's when the changes started happening. The first time she said, "You're blocking my expansion, Jordan," I didn't even know what she meant. But she was sure of it. Her language shifted. Her tone was different. And the things she started to say, things that used to be a joke between us, suddenly felt like a dismissal of everything I'd built. She'd tell me how my routines were restricting her flow, or how my priorities didn't align with her true self. She started disappearing for days at a time, going to what she called energy retreats, whatever the hell that was. I didn't ask, didn't want to know. She was clearly changing, and I wasn't part of it. It was like she had joined some cult of self-empowerment, and I wasn't even invited to the party. And the more I saw her drifting, the more I felt like I was being left behind. Then, one day, she came back with Derek. Just like that. "I met someone," she said, sitting at the table, a glass of wine in hand. "This is Derek. He's part of the group, too. He's helping me see things more clearly." Derek was everything I wasn't. He was smooth, confident, one of those guys who always seemed to know the right thing to say. He looked like he stepped out of a catalog, with perfectly styled hair and the kind of smile that made you want to punch him. I didn't trust him from the moment he walked in, and I didn't need to. I didn't need to say anything because Emily had already decided. She was so absorbed in her awakening that she didn't see how it all fell off. It wasn't just the weird, cult-like vibes from the group. It was the way Derek would look at her, like he knew he was a part of something I couldn't touch. I kept my mouth shut. What was the point? Confrontation would only be ammunition in whatever story she was already creating. She would turn it against me. She always did. So I watched. I observed. I pulled back further into the quiet spaces of the house, focusing on what I could control. I started backing everything up. Every email, every financial record, all the communications with suppliers, clients, contracts, anything that could prove that Beck Modular was mine and mine alone. I called it Project Silt. It wasn't much, not yet, but it was all I could do. I couldn't control what Emily did or who she spent time with, but I could make sure that everything I'd built wasn't at risk. Every time Derek came over, I'd stay out of sight. I didn't need to engage with him. But every time they sat together in the kitchen, laughing or talking about their latest expansion, I felt like I was being erased. My work, my vision, the thing I'd spent the last few years building, didn't even matter to her anymore. She'd always told me how she wanted to be more than just a wife, more than just a background character in my life. I never thought it would look like this. But she had her own idea now. She had Derek, she had Crystal, and she had a whole new world she was diving into. Meanwhile, I was stuck. I was watching everything unravel, and the worst part? I knew I couldn't stop it. But what I could do, what I had to do, was make sure that when it all came down, I had something to stand on. Something real. Something solid. Something that didn't depend on anyone else. I could feel the weight of Emily's words settle into my chest. A new domestic partnership. She'd said it so casually, like it was just another thing on her to-do list. She was done. Derek was in, and I was out. I wasn't going to fight her. Not in that moment. I didn't need to make a scene or beg for something that wasn't coming back. So I nodded, the same way I had earlier, and said, "Okay, I'll pack." She seemed pleased with my answer, like she'd won. I knew she thought she'd cornered me. The smug look on her face was too familiar. She'd always liked feeling in control, always had to be the one making the decisions. And now, she had Derek to back her up. It was exactly what she wanted. "Take your time," Emily said, voice smooth, casual. "You have 72 hours to get everything together. It's only fair." I agreed without hesitation, keeping my face neutral. But inside, something was clicking into place. I hadn't agreed to leave. I'd agreed to get my things, that was all. I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. As soon as I turned my back, I pulled out my phone. I didn't need to say anything more to her. The next step was already in motion. I texted my CFO. 3 words. Simple. Direct. Launch SILT. That was all it took. Over the next few hours, I watched everything start to unfold in the background. My team had been waiting for this moment. Asset locks triggered, locking down all of Beck Modular's corporate accounts. Legal notices were prepped, ready to be delivered. Corporate property was flagged, and vendors were notified. The wheels were turning, and there was no stopping them now. But as I stood in the kitchen, packing a bag with just a few essentials, Emily and Derek were still oblivious. They were lounging in the living room, talking about their next trip or whatever energy retreat was on the horizon. Emily was full of herself, excited about whatever came next, while Derek smiled like he had everything figured out. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. They didn't see the storm building just beneath the surface. They thought this was a game. They thought they had the upper hand. But I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. I packed in silence, methodical. I had to move quickly, but I didn't want to make a scene. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of knowing that anything was wrong. I was calm, collected, in control, even if it didn't seem like it. By the time I finished packing my things, I'd made sure everything was in place. It wasn't much, just a bag with clothes, a few personal items, my laptop, and my phone. The rest? I left it behind. Emily could have it. I didn't care about the stuff. I cared about what I had built. I left the house quietly, trying to make as little noise as possible. No goodbyes. No drama. Just the sound of my shoes on the floor and the door closing behind me. The company's off-site warehouse office was only a short drive away. It wasn't much, just an old industrial space with a few desks and some prototypes scattered around. But it was mine. It felt like the only place I could breathe. I set up camp there, just for now. A bed, a desk, a small fridge. Enough to get by. I'd be fine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things were already changing. The next few hours would be a blur. But Emily and Derek? They still had no clue. They were still enjoying the peace they thought they'd won. What they didn't realize was that the real game was just getting started. And this time, I wasn't going to lose. I was at the warehouse when the notices went out. I'd made sure of that. A few hours earlier, I'd settled into the space, watching the sunrise filter through the cracked blinds, feeling the weight of what I had just set into motion. There was no turning back now. Everything was about to change. By the time Emily and Derek got their copies, I was already miles away from the house, watching the world outside the warehouse window. It wasn't long before I got the call from Marcia, my corporate attorney. "It's done," she said, no hint of emotion. "We've delivered the notices. To both of them. They'll be reading it now." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "How'd they take it?" "Surprisingly calm," Marcia said. "I think they thought it was a bluff. But now they'll understand it's not. The cease and desist orders for the corporate property, the vacate notice for the house, and the divorce petition, it's all in writing. The assets are locked. No access. No ownership. Good. I didn't want them to think this was a game anymore. I needed them to see it. Really see it. Another call came in shortly after. This time, I didn't need to hear the words. I could tell by the sound of her voice that Emily was stunned. And that was enough. I didn't go back to the house. Not yet. I let Marcia take over. She was sharp, had been in this business for too long to get emotional about it. She walked Emily and Derek through everything, explaining it slowly, so there'd be no misunderstandings. Let's make this clear, Marcia told them, her tone clipped, professional. The house, the cars, the luxury assets you've been enjoying, they're not part of the marital estate. They belong to Beck Modular Systems, which, as Jordan's sole business, is not subject to community division. You do not have ownership here. Neither of you. Derek tried to interrupt. I could hear his voice, full of that cocky confidence, already grasping for control. Wait a minute, that's not how this works. Emily has a right. Marcia cut him off. No, Derek. She does not. She has no position, no claim within Beck Modular. It's Jordan's company. It always has been. I could practically hear the silence on the other end of the line. Derek probably didn't know what to say. And Emily? I could almost feel her world crumbling in real time. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, none of it was hers. None of it was ever really hers. I sat back in the chair and let it all sink in. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even satisfied. I was just done. I didn't want the drama anymore. I didn't want the facade. I didn't want her pretending that any of this was ever real. Marcia spoke again, this time with a little more finality. And the divorce petition is clear, Emily. There's no community property, no shared assets here. The house and the vehicles are company property. As for the rest, she let the sentence hang in the air. There was nothing left to say. The last thing I heard was Emily's quiet gasp, the realization of everything she thought she had, everything she built her life on, slipping through her fingers. I imagined her staring at the papers, probably looking around the house, seeing it for the first time in a completely different light. It wasn't hers. Not anymore. Marcia wrapped up the call, and I sat still for a minute. I knew Emily would call. She'd try to talk her way out of it. But this was beyond talking. She had asked for clarity. And now, she had it. I didn't need to say much more. When I finally spoke, I kept it simple, just a few words to cut through the quiet of the moment. You asked for clarity. This is it. It wasn't a victory, not really. It wasn't even about winning. It was just about getting things straight. And in that moment, I knew everything was going to change. And there was nothing Emily or Derek could do to stop it. I put the phone down and leaned back, letting the silence wrap around me. The next move was theirs. They could try to fight it, but they wouldn't win. I'd made sure of that. The panic set in fast. I could almost hear it buzzing through the air, like a static charge just before a storm breaks. Emily, in her usual style, tried to fight it with the one thing she knew how to do, control the narrative. The first few calls came in the early afternoon. She must have thought I'd be easy to sway. Maybe she thought I'd give her a chance to talk it through, to fix things. She started calling friends. Her circle, the ones who always praised her empowerment and told her she was better than anyone stuck in a traditional marriage. None of them picked up. Not one. The silence must have been deafening. Then came the messages, long, frantic texts from Crystal. Don't let him control the narrative, Emily. You're in a powerful place. You're evolving. But even those texts stopped coming after a while. It wasn't long before the vendor notifications started pinging through. I could almost picture the look on her face when she saw that her wellness brand accounts were getting canceled one by one, deliveries halted, subscriptions revoked. All the luxuries she'd relied on were being yanked out from under her, and there was nothing she could do about it. She didn't get it. She didn't understand the business side of things, not really. She thought her Instagram followers and her carefully curated life were enough to hold it all together. But I'd built that house with more than just some flashy photos and good vibes. When the money and the access dried up, that whole world came crashing down. Derek's downfall came next. Word spread fast. People talk, especially in the circles they moved in. It turned out Derek's firm had been sniffing around for a while, and now they had a reason to act. They'd caught wind of his conflict of interest. He'd been advising Emily, building connections, while also getting the benefits of the lifestyle she was living. They put him on leave, pending an investigation. The ethics board was already involved, and the whispers of a scandal were too loud to ignore. But Derek didn't get it, either. He was still trying to protect Emily, thinking he could save her from the fallout. Meanwhile, I was just sitting back and watching it all unfold. This wasn't my mess anymore. This was hers. By the time I saw Emily again, she wasn't sitting in the house, soaking in luxury. She was crashing on her sister's couch, a crumpled mess of borrowed pillows, the sleek, perfectly curated life she'd spent years crafting now reduced to a handful of bags by the front door. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered how much of this was her own doing. The worst part? She still thought there was some way out. She still thought she could turn it around, like it was just another challenge to overcome. But I knew better. The thing was, she was so used to getting what she wanted, she didn't understand how to lose. Not until it was too late. I didn't make any calls, didn't send any messages. I didn't need to. I had my plans in motion, and they didn't depend on her. They didn't depend on any of them. So I let her stew. Let her feel the weight of what she'd done. Let Derek sit on the sidelines, wondering how it all fell apart. I wasn't going to rush in to pick up the pieces. Not this time. Not for her. Instead, I stayed focused. Beck Modular wasn't going to stop. The work I'd built wasn't going to unravel because of a few people who thought they could play the game and never face the consequences. I watched from a distance, indifferent to the drama. And maybe that was the worst part of it all. That the person she thought would be devastated, the person she thought she had control over, wasn't paying attention anymore. The court conference felt like something out of a script, but with much higher stakes. I was sitting at the long table, Marcia across from me, her face calm, focused. The judge was already flipping through papers, a stack of legal documents between him and Emily's lawyer. Emily had her lawyer, some family law specialist with a clean-cut suit and a smile that probably worked wonders on clients. But it wasn't going to work today. Her lawyer started right away, trying to paint this picture of joint ownership based on how long Emily and I had been married. He used words like fair distribution and contribution to the household, the usual rhetoric that you'd expect in a divorce hearing. But it felt hollow, like he was reading from a textbook that didn't apply to me. He tried to argue that just because Beck Modular was mine didn't mean Emily didn't deserve a share of it, because of how long we'd been married. Your Honor, he began, the marriage lasted over a decade. Even if the business predated their union, there was significant shared contribution over time. The luxury assets, the house, the vehicles, are all part of the marital estate. I could feel the weight of his words, but I also knew what was coming. Marcia didn't hesitate. She slid a thick folder of documents over to the judge, and I could almost hear her confidence as she spoke. Your Honor, we have clear documentation that Beck Modular predates the marriage. All significant assets, including the property and vehicles in question, are company assets. Everything was purchased through the company. There was no commingling of personal and business funds. She paused, letting that settle in. And as for Ms. Beck's contribution, while she may have contributed in her own way to the household, she was never an active participant in the business. There's no record of her involvement in any decision-making, no record of her offering financial support or investing in the company. Emily's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved it off. He was already skimming through the financial documents Marcia had provided, the airtight records showing how every cent of the business had been kept separate from our personal accounts. Then, Marcia's next move came with the kind of precision that made my chest tighten. She nodded toward Jordan, my financial officer, who had been sitting quietly beside me. He stood and walked forward, papers in hand. As he handed the judge the records, Marcia spoke again. We've also compiled detailed records of Ms. Beck's personal expenditures. They're generous, but we found no evidence of any personal spending that was ever commingled with company funds. The financial officer continued, presenting the records of Emily's lavish spending, the designer clothes, the vacations, the high-end wellness products, all funded through her personal accounts, not Beck Modular's. There was no question. Emily's face had turned a pale shade of white. The smile she'd tried to wear earlier, that confident, "I've got this" look, was gone. Derek wasn't there, but I could almost hear his voice echoing in her head, trying to make it better, trying to twist the facts. The judge sat back, looking from the documents to Emily, and then to me. I could tell he was weighing the situation carefully. Given the evidence, the judge said, finally breaking the silence, It's clear that the assets in question are corporate property. There are no grounds for asset sharing outside the joint account. He paused, then turned his gaze to Emily. I'm ordering that you vacate the property immediately. The house, the vehicles, they belong to Beck Modular. No further access will be allowed. I couldn't help but feel a brief moment of cold satisfaction. This wasn't about me trying to win. It was about getting things clear. Emily had asked for clarity. Now she had it. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp thud, and the reality of it settled in. The house wasn't hers. The cars weren't hers. The lifestyle she'd built, the one she'd relied on, was never hers to keep. She could try to fight it, but there was nothing left to fight with. As I left the courtroom, I didn't feel elation. I didn't feel any kind of victory. I felt the weight of it all, how much time had been wasted, how far things had gone before they'd cracked. But this was the end of it, the moment I'd been waiting for. And as the door to the courtroom closed behind me, I couldn't help but wonder how Emily was processing it. The day the house was cleared, I stayed out of sight. My team was there, though, supervising the removal of all non-personal items. It wasn't a moment for confrontation. Not anymore. They did their job professionally, polite, firm, no drama. The movers took every piece of furniture, every decoration, the luxury items she'd come to see as a given. Nothing was left behind except for the things Emily had called her own. I'd already made sure all her personal belongings were set aside. She was free to take what she wanted, 2 duffel bags, a jewelry box. That was all that fit in the back of the car. It seemed fitting in a way. After all the posts, all the elevated lifestyle photos, the influencer persona she'd carefully crafted for years, this was it. This was all she had left. I wasn't there when she came downstairs to see the empty house. I didn't need to be. I knew how it would go. She'd try to hold herself together, try to maintain some grace, the same way she always did, as if the surface could hide the mess underneath. But I knew better. When I finally saw her later, her face was pale. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, looking around like she couldn't believe what had just happened. The reality was starting to hit her, sinking in slowly. No house, no cars, no more status, no more elevated life that had always been built on borrowed time. The cracks were starting to show. She didn't break down immediately, but I could see it in the way her shoulders slumped, how she let out a long breath like she was trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through her fingers. "Jordan," she finally said, her voice shaking slightly. But she didn't finish the sentence. What was there left to say? I didn't respond. I didn't have to. There was nothing left for me to fix. I wasn't the one who had put her in this position. She had built it all on the wrong foundation, and now the house of cards was collapsing. Meanwhile, Derek's situation was going from bad to worse. His firm had initiated a formal ethics review. Word had gotten out about his conflict of interest, about his involvement with Emily while benefiting from her lifestyle. He was put on leave pending an investigation. I didn't need to hear the details to know what that meant for him. His career was over. Whatever influence he thought he had was gone. Emily's calls to him went unanswered. She tried to cling to whatever she thought was left of their connection, but even Derek couldn't save her now. She was on her own. I wasn't the only one who'd been watching from the sidelines. Crystal, the lifestyle strategist, who had played such a big role in Emily's transformation, made sure to distance herself publicly. One post, one simple line. I support my clients' journeys, but I can no longer align with this path. And just like that, the elevation circle evaporated. The friends, the followers, the network of wellness gurus and influencers, they all scattered, as if they'd never been there in the first place. Emily had no one left. It all crumbled so quickly. The new arrangement she had tried to put in place, the one she'd convinced herself would be her breakthrough, was nothing more than an illusion. Derek had failed her, Crystal had abandoned her, and now she was left with nothing but a few bags and a life she could barely recognize. As for me, I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel any relief either. I just watched it all unfold, knowing this was the price she had to pay. This was the fallout from the choices she'd made. And somewhere deep down, I knew she wouldn't be the only one left to clean up the mess. The house felt different now, bigger somehow, empty in ways it hadn't been before. I converted the master bedroom into a product testing space, clearing out the furniture and setting up the workbench, the prototype drones, the testing equipment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was everything I needed. I wanted to get back to the heart of the business, away from the noise, away from everything that had distracted me before. I brought in 2 local engineering interns to help. Fresh talent, eager to prove themselves. They didn't ask questions, didn't care about anything outside the work. They just wanted to learn and build. It was the kind of energy I needed. We started cranking out new designs, better, faster, more sustainable. The work felt like it had purpose again, like I was finally back on track. The business grew too. New contracts came in, bigger ones. I was making deals with schools, hospitals, even some government departments. Beck Modular wasn't just a startup anymore. It was starting to look like a real player in the industry. The awards came next, sustainability awards, innovation accolades. They weren't the kind of trophies that made headlines, but they meant something to me. They were validation that the work, the sacrifice, had all been worth it. Meanwhile, I kept up with a small, quiet routine. Every week, I delivered fresh loaves of bread to my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Leonard. She couldn't get out much, so I'd leave a loaf on her doorstep, knock, and step back to let her come out. Sometimes, she'd catch me on my way back to the car, and we'd talk for a few minutes. Nothing big, just small talk about the weather or the old oak tree in the yard. I liked it. It felt good to do something that wasn't about profit or growth, just kindness. But there was something else, too. Something that wouldn't let me move on completely. My phone would buzz at odd hours, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I'd pick it up, only to hear silence for a second before the click of a hang-up. I knew who it was. Emily. I'd seen the messages. The ones she sent, usually late at night, asking how I was, trying to explain things, trying to reconnect. They were always the same. I've changed. Let's talk. But I didn't pick up. I didn't respond. I couldn't. It wasn't about anger anymore. I wasn't angry at her. I wasn't bitter. I was just indifferent. She had her chance, and she'd made her choices. I wasn't the one who had to fix it. That wasn't my job anymore. One evening, I sat at the kitchen island, the same spot where Derek had once lounged, his feet up, acting like he belonged there. The silence in the house felt right now. I pulled my laptop toward me, sketched out some new designs, and sipped on my coffee. It was exactly how I wanted it. Quiet. No distractions. Just the work. The house was different now. Empty, yes, but it felt like it was mine again. There was no one to answer to, no one to impress, just the business and me. And for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't even look. I knew who it was, but I was done looking back. All that noise, all that chaos, it wasn't mine to deal with anymore. So I hit the mute button, set the phone face down, and focused on the design in front of me. The silence suited me. 6 months later, the house feels different. The silence is no longer something I'm just tolerating. It's something I've embraced. I walk through the rooms, and they feel like they belong to me now, truly mine. Not just in name or ownership, but in the way I move through the space, the way the house hums with the work I've put into it. The kitchen is my studio now. It's where I draft my next designs, make notes on prototypes, and grind through the details of new projects. The counter is cluttered with sketches, coffee cups, and open laptops. There's nothing pristine about it. It's functional, focused. This space isn't for impressing anyone. It's for doing the work that matters. And the work has been good. Really good. Beck Modular is thriving. The new prototype, a sustainable, reusable takeout container, could change the industry. I'm gearing up to pitch it to a national chain. It's exciting, but it's also steady. It feels earned. Everything I'm doing now, I know I built it on my own terms. I've got people I trust, people who care about the work, not the drama or the status. My team, the interns, my CFO, they're here because they believe in what we're building, not because they want a piece of a lifestyle. There's a clarity in that I didn't have before. As for Emily, she still calls. I don't pick up. Every few weeks, an unknown number will pop up on my phone, and I know it's her. Sometimes she leaves messages. She tells me she's changed, that she's doing better, that we should talk. But I don't respond. It's not about anger. It's not even about the past anymore. It's just uninterested. I've moved on. She made her choices, and they were hers to make. I'm not holding on to any of it. The peace I have now, the control, the focus, it's not just a better arrangement. It's the right one. I don't need anything else.